Hey folks, Kevin here. Well, it's October 25th, 2019. Hopefully I've posted a video already on the first half of the Ask Me Anything from recent comments and questions and all. And today is another episode of Ask Me Anything. I was so long-winded yesterday, it took a while to get through everything. Somehow I'd missed a comment on one of my videos a year ago, and I wanted to hit that today. David Hammond commented on one of my videos, and I think it was the How Quickly Do Wood Chips Decompose video. I've been collecting organic material, including wood chips. I've been composting it down with the hopes that I can fill low areas in my yard, being able to turn that area into garden space. What limitations am I going to face? How deep can I make the area? At one spot, I may need to build it up 2 feet. Your thoughts? And I think David had actually commented again recently saying that he was nearby here, and I'm sorry, I'm so terrible with keeping track of all my different comments from constituents, from the viewers. Let me say this. I haven't been composting wood chips, and when I think of composting wood chips, I think not really of composting. I think of leaving wood chips in a large pile and letting that pile get up to heat, where when you dig into it, you see the steam coming off from it, more or less like the person who started the whole Back to Eden system started, where he piles it up, lets it age there and start to decompose naturally, and then takes those aged wood chips and bring them into the gardens and his orchard areas as well. So, and I actually don't even do that. As soon as I get the wood chips, they go right to work in our areas. Now, I'm not sure which videos you've seen of me talking about the various wood chips. I made several videos, and I apologize for how terrible my organizational skills are with the videos on my channel. It's embarrassing because I can't even find some of my videos at times. There's an area, and I'm just looking off screen to the area where it's at the southernmost border of my neighbor's property. And I put up a fence about 15 or 16 years ago. That's a 6-foot cedar fence that goes down the north-south wall bordering his property. And because I border two sides, I border his southern border as well. There's a fence that goes along the southern border. Now, the slope of our property goes from the northeast to the southwest. And his property is to the west side of my northern part of my property. I hope that makes sense. So as a result, the slope of the land coming down this way, I've been building up the soil on the back part of his property or part of my property. And this is for nutrient and water retention, carbon sequestration, and creating a base for a high tunnel. Previously, I had posted a video about me taking down a Gothic high tunnel and from a nursery that was closing down. It's about 96 feet long and I think 17 feet wide. And that will fit beautifully over in the area, which used to be something you couldn't garden in because it would take all the rain and and water that would exceed the surface area of the property and go right down and flood the Gothic high tunnel if I put it there. So I had to raise that area up quite a bit. Now, as I mentioned, that's a 6-foot cedar fence right at the back of his property. The property actually slopes further, it slopes down the further south and the further west we go. So when you look at that fence, you'll see that I'm about 1 foot from the top of the fence right now with the wood chips and where I'm starting the living fence there. And I'll shoot some GoPro while this video is going. And I've been working at that probably for 4 years now. And I took many loads of wood chips into that area. And I took some dirt at times that was in an area, and I'll in the upper right hand corner I'll put a link to a video where I carved in a swale that is a drainage swale that gathers water from all the eastern part of the property as water works to the west, and the nutrients that end up in that water get into a swale system that I'm designing. It isn't finished yet, but it comes down and it meets the area around the work area, and I gather that water, bring it around, and I bring it over into the pond right alongside of me, pond 5, which is the leaky pond that I've been patching. So in order for that water to go through the swale system, it had to bypass the lower area of the property that I subsequently built up with many, many, many loads of wood chips over the years, and over these last 4 years now. And those wood chips, each time I build it up to 6 feet, the first year I built it up to 6 feet, it went down to about 2 feet in depth. And then I built it up to 6 feet tall again, and it went down to probably about 3 feet in depth. So initially there's a great deal of consolidation, compaction, and all with all this, because I'd be taking my tractor and then the excavator up and trying to build that build the area up as much as I could. When I got to the point where I was cutting in the swale around the area, I used the dirt from the swale to help infiltrate amongst the wood chips, to have some, because this is predominantly sand and gravel, and really bony stones. So the bigger stones, I took all of those out, but the sand would help to stabilize and provide some drainage, porosity into the wood chips after they've decomposed completely. And I was hoping to get the Gothic High Tunnel up this year. Now, on top of the wood chips near the fence, where I've started the living fence, which are many of the what do I have there? I put seeds from the black locust trees over there. I took various garden seeds, put them over there as well. I have some sage, a few black locusts, but mainly I have the elderberry plants. And some of the elderberry plants, where the wood chips were actually the deepest, they did fantastic initially, and those were hardwood cuttings that I had started a year and a half ago and transplanted there this spring. They did fantastic all spring until the ground started to dry out and the rainfall all stopped, and we had our dry summer. Well, they died back. Hopefully the roots are still good there. But one of the things I did when I got some of the loads of manure after I had my full large composting system going, I decided I was spread that out, cover it with leaves, and I let that decompose on top of the wood chips, and then I moved it up next to the fence as well. So now I have a more nitrogen-rich layer on top of a few feet of wood chips that have been gradually breaking down. And that nitrogen will help to feed all of that carbon-rich material of the wood chips. I hope this is all making sense as I'm going through this. So that's a living fence in that area. What else did I do before I started doing all of the wood chips in this area that required 6 foot or more of fill in the area? Now, the first thing I did was I put a hugelkultur pit below where all the wood chips are, below the 6 feet. So what is a hugelkultur pit? I'll put a link in the upper right hand corner that explains what the hugelkultur pit is up in the second and third food forest areas, where all the ponds and swales are cut in, and this is an area that I've been working on recently, and I posted videos about recently. But explaining what the hugelkultur pit is, refer to that link. Since I've had so much success with these hugelkultur pits, I can take trees from all the dead trees around the property, cut them up, including the stumps. When I dig out a stump and I'm going to be putting another feature or another garden into an area, I dig up the stumps. Any big rocks with it as well, I'll use those, but mostly I use the rocks in the stone wall. So I took all the woody material from small branches to the trunks of the tree, to the big branches and the stumps, and I dug with a mini excavator, dug down 6-8 feet deep, put all the wood in there, and then took the dirt and covered that wood up. And so that's what I'm calling hugelkultur pits. So I'm trying to sequester all the carbon from all those trees and all those materials in that. That helped raise the soil level a bit. But over time, all of those materials, certainly there's little voids between all of the trunks and the branches and the different sizes there. And there's a settling of the materials, the soil that goes down in there. And by covering it all up by the wood chips as they're gradually going and driving over it regularly, we're filling that in. We're compacting, consolidating the area. And now, over 4 years, that area has built up much. Will that start to drop a bit more? Yes. But the goal is always, when I'm building these deep carbonaceous garden areas, I want to build it up much higher than I think I'm going to need it. The first 3 years, the first year, and I think Kate Cortez commented that she had put a whole bunch of wood chips in one area of her yard, and she was pretty much shocked. I think she had put like 2 feet in one area of her yard, and it had gone down to, I think, like 8 inches or whatever. And that's been my experience as well. So a lot of it is compaction, consolidation that happens as a result of the reorientation and the weather changes and the moisture content. And certainly then the decomposition really starts. All of those surface areas of the wood chips, the smaller they are, the quicker it's happened, because there's greater surface area for the microorganisms to work at. And as a result, those first few years, there's the rate of decomposition is massive. Initially, consolidation, compaction happens, then the decomposition really kicks into gear. And about year 4 is when we see a real slowing of it. But there's still going to be, for the next 5 or 6 years, some more decomposition of that woody material. So in order to help that, we can take other nitrogen-rich materials or smaller carbon sources. So, like the town, fortunately for me, they are responsible for picking up the loads that their landscaping services pile up leaves at the cemeteries. So those leaves get loaded into the big town trucks, and they bring them over here. So one of the things that I see that helps to stabilize or increase the rate of decomposition of the wood chips, if there's a layer of leaves, and that happens in the fall, so probably within the next 4 weeks, they'll come by with probably 3 or 4 dump truck loads of leaves, and they're incorporated into a layer just beneath all of the wood chips that we put there. And they help to speed up the process of the decomposition of the wood chips as well. And helps to stabilize it as well. The fungal elements go right through that. The other thing that I do, and I've mentioned this in previous videos, because I get wood chips regularly, and because I have a nice hardwood forest, natural forest nearby, some areas where the emerald ash borer has destroyed all of my white ash trees, but other areas where it's predominantly maple, where we're going to be tapping the trees. Well, in those areas, what I ended up doing was going with my tractor and taking a full load, a great big load of wood chips from one of the trucks that come in, and I lay them in piles, a low, say 2 feet deep, in the woods during the fall time, and that's when all the fungal organisms are really going up to start breaking down all the leaves that fall on the forest floor. And if you go in during the midsummer, all those leaves are gone. So all the mycelium start working their way up through the base, and during the fall time, when you put all the wood chips into the forest, well, they become inoculated. And as a result, all of those fungal organisms, the next spring, you can take those. I go in and just to pick up a bucket load, and then takes forks of it and throw it around where I'm going to be dumping more wood chips. So I'm seeding I'm using a probiotic, using the microorganisms from the forest that I've already inoculated. So that's a probiotic loaded with the appropriate microorganisms that I want for my wood chips beds, or my deep wood chipping areas. I lay that out in just patches. It doesn't have to be very thick. Then I lay my prebiotic, the fresh wood chips that comes from the tree service, as food for the probiotic, the beneficial microorganisms that I've laid into those areas. I know I'm wordy. I hope this is making sense as I'm describing this. So, so that's one area. Just yesterday, I posted a video, or last couple days, I posted a video where I'm transplanting trees in the second food forest, and I'm changing the mound height or the peak of the hill next to the swale systems that I installed several years ago. And I'm doing that to make the slope more gradual, so that it makes it easier for harvesting the fruit off the trees, safer, so I don't have changes in elevations that are severe, so that I can create the appropriate climate for all my companion species, or my guilds that are going to go around all these trees. So there's red buds, there's honey locusts up in there, there's all the apple and various fruit trees as well, and the nut trees there. The nut trees I leave at the peak of the hill. All of the fruit trees I move back from the peak of the hill, because I'm going to be climbing up in those trees using my tripod ladders, and I want it to be very stable and easy to get to. I'm really paying close attention because during these formative years, when we're starting these food forest areas, we don't want the weeds to overtake, we don't want the pioneer species to overtake, so my way of chopping and dropping is going in once or twice a year with my big mower that's 6 feet wide, so I want to be able to navigate between all of them and have the cages around them. So that was what I was talking about with the video. Well, I got a small load yesterday, and to give you an example, when you looked at that video, you may have seen the compost, how I build up the root supportive compost area around each one of those trees, and put the protective tree guards around them, or tree cages around them, to prevent deer rub and deer browsing from. But now, as I get more wood chips in, I'm filling in the voids between each one of those root crowns that are there. And it takes 2 years or 3 years, 2 seasons of working 2 years apart, so 3 years of laying the wood chips in there and going right up to the level of the crown and going a little bit above it. And where the root masses are and the compost is, that'll stay at the same level, but it'll indent. So in most of those places, there's 18, some areas there'll be 30 inches deep of wood chips initially, which really requires a lot of loads of wood chips, but it creates an atmosphere that is fungally dominated, and therefore it supports a food forest, as opposed to the bacterially dominated brassicas that we could be putting in as well. So, sorry it took me so darn long to get back to you, David. Let me grab my papers here that I dropped. So that was David. I got another question from Karen Mergner. Karen Mergner. And I have a question concerning red oak trees and their acorns. What can be done if the older oaks, which drop tons of acorns, have worms in them? Is there some way to treat the trees? I am wondering if these worms end up in the soil under the grass and cause turf damage. So what you're referring to and what you're observing is acorn weevils. There are acorn worms, which are not to be confused with acorn weevils. What should I say about the acorn weevils? So I don't think that they do any actual damage to the oak trees or to the soils there. So the life cycle of the acorn weevil, the female emerges probably 2 years, maybe 3 years after it's had a chance for the larvae to metamorphose into an adult. And that adult makes its way, the female makes her way up to the tree, probably early in the summertime, I'm assuming, and she finds these beautiful green, immature acorns on the tree. And she has a proboscis, like an elephant-like trunk, that the trunk is actually longer or equal length to the rest of her body. And this proboscis actually has like little mouth parts or jaw parts on the end of it, which allow her to bore through a very small hole through the surface of the immature acorn. And the acorn is a really good resource of fats inside of there. And so she feeds on these fats after she's bored through the outer part of the acorn before it becomes a really hard shell. And she feeds on all these rich fatty acids inside of the acorn, and then she turns around and deposits eggs into that void that she had just been consuming from. And then she uses feces to go ahead and plug up the hole of the acorn. That egg ultimately hatches and develops into a larvae inside of the acorn and matures to a full-blown larvae by the end of the fall, this time of year when all the acorns are falling and hitting the ground. The impact of the acorn, I believe it's the impact of the acorn hitting the ground, triggers the larvae to go ahead and use its mouth parts to bore these perfectly round little 1/8-inch holes through the hard shell of the acorn. The larvae has already consumed most of the contents within the acorn, the seed itself, and all the supportive materials inside of the seed, and then exits the acorn, and then the larvae needs to burrow into the ground, where it can take a couple of years to metamorphose into an adult weevil. Shrews are after these little larvae, so there'll be shrews around. So knowing the difference between a shrew and a vole and a mole is kind of important as gardeners and farmers and naturalists. So we want the shrews there. They'll consume all of these troublesome little critters. It's the voles that eat the vegetative materials that do the damage to the base of the trees and all. And the toads will eat the voles and all. So I don't think that the acorn weevil actually does any damage to the oak trees or to the turf surrounding the trees. It's just part of the life cycle of many of them. I know that you can separate the good acorns if you're harvesting acorns by putting them in the water and seeing which ones float. You can determine which ones are the empty little weevil holed shells, and that can help you to separate in case you're harvesting for making flour out of the acorns or using it as an acorn meal as well. And I think that was the end of my questions for this one here. I really appreciate everyone's contribution, asking questions, answering each other's questions, and it gives me ideas about things to talk about as well. I sometimes just get caught up in what I'm doing and forget to share things as well. And the weather certainly affects that as well. So thank you so much for all your contributions. I really enjoy it a great deal, and I'm glad that these videos are beneficial to some of you. That makes my day. So if you found this video of value, please give us a thumbs up, share it with your friends. That really helps our channel to grow as well. There's an Amazon affiliate link in the description of these. It doesn't cost you any more. It can help us out if you use that. If you do shop on Amazon, they give us a really tiny commission, but that's how I can buy camera gear or tools or whatever it is that we're using here on site. We really appreciate that as well. And by all means, certainly leave comments, interact as members of the community, working with each other and all. I get so busy around here at times, and sometimes I miss comments, and I apologize for that as well. I recently had a comment about my hat, wondering what material it's made out of. I try not to buy animal products. I'm a plant-based person as far as eating things, and a sustainability and resilience nut. So I'm always trying to put in systems that can do as much work for me as possible. And over the years, I've learned a lot about how to use these materials that can break down in the environment as well. So thanks so much for watching, folks. I really appreciate it, and have a great day. Bye-bye now.